as part of my ongoing series on examining political parties and political ideas that generally don't get a lot of airing on the mainstream media, and that is both on the left and on the right, we are joined by William Johnson, who is a representative of the American Freedom Party. William, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Oh, thank you for having me.
William, talk a bit about what the American Freedom Party is, how old the party is. I mean, just give me some of the nuts and bolts of what you guys are doing over there.
Oh, well, we're about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe 4 years old. And our original name was the American Third Position, but that didn't really generate too much recognition in the States. Third positionism is, I guess, more popular in Europe than it is here. We're not really left or right or liberal or conservative. We just take the best of all parties, and we just generally analyze the situation and the issues, and we decide what is best for society. And so that's the position that we're coming from. We're strongly environmental. We are ethnic nationalists. I particularly want a separate white ethno-state. I don't think that this multiculturalism is working. We are populist. We approve a lot of the social programs if they were instituted in a manner that would be consistent with furthering the population and furthering what's good for the world, as opposed to a dysgenic approach that we have now.
Would you describe your party as National Socialist?
No.
Okay. You have a book out, Vision for America. It sounds to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're not supporters of the U.S. Constitution as it's presently constituted. Is that true?
I believe that we support the Constitution. That Vision for America was written by our presidential candidate, and I've glanced through it, but I'm not sure. I'd be surprised if you got anything in there that was not supportive of the Constitution, because our presidential candidate was one of the more gung-ho, pro-America, military-type guys. So, I'm not sure where you got that. But we do have in our membership a lot of people. We have people that feel disenfranchised, and so they've become kind of anti-government. And if you're anti-government, in a sense, you can be considered anti-Constitution. But then we have people like Merlin Miller, who was our presidential candidate, who is very much pro-government. And I'm kind of more on the anti-government end of the spectrum.
Well, first of all, I would think that being anti-government does not necessarily mean you're anti-Constitution. I mean, one can be against aspects of our government that have superseded the Constitution or have sold away parts of the Constitution to private parties and even foreign parties.
Yeah, that's right. I think that the Constitution is subject to such open interpretation. You can claim that the people in power are anti-Constitution because they break it so often. So that's a good point.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. I mean, by being pro-Constitution, oftentimes we are called anti-government when, in fact, we're the pro-government people. It's the people in power who are anti-American government based upon our system, our theory of government, which is the constitutional system. Now, William Johnson's my guest again, the American Freedom Party. William, you said that you support a separatist white nation. What does that mean?
Well, I believe, and our party doesn't advocate this, and some members do advocate it, some members don't. But I believe that multiculturalism and diversity is a failure, and there's kind of a buzzword going around that says diversity is a code word for white genocide. And I think that truly is the case. I believe that worldwide Western civilization and the white race is collapsing through the principles of diversity and multiculturalism. And America, I believe, for as long as I can remember, has been the key exporter of these ideas. And, America used to be admired by the world, but then as America, or traditional America, has engaged in self-loathing, the rest of the world has followed suit. So I think there comes a time now when we need to look to see what's happening in other countries, and nationalism, balkanization, dividing up of the countries is a movement taking place rapidly in Europe. And I think we need to consider those theories behind those efforts. I mean, you've got Catalonia trying to break away from Spain. You have Scotland trying to break away from the United Kingdom. You have Venice. Various countries are trying to break away. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about Europe in a minute, but getting back to the United States, it seems to me that you actually are, and this is something that interests me, that you're actually advocating a form of multiculturalism that is similar to those who advocate multiculturalism, and I personally reject the whole idea as a matter of public policy, and that is an emphasis on racial and ethnic backgrounds as if this really means something. It seems to me that the American approach has been to be colorblind, to be that things, matters such as race and ethnic background and faith, denominational faith, that those things we are free to associate, and that we are able to express those aspects of our personality if we choose to. But as a matter of public policy, we've generally not, we've been a colorblind society. We've put forth the importance of the individual and individual accomplishment first, which is why I reject this whole multicultural approach, which views some kind of an importance. They actually think that people of different races or different ethnicities or genders or sexual orientations are different literally, that they actually have different minds, that they're different people. And it seems to me that that's what you're into, except obviously from a different perspective.
You are right on in that it is against public policy in this country to make sort of any distinction based upon those protected classifications that you've just mentioned. And that has held sway in the country probably for the extent of my lifetime. And that is what we are fighting against, because we believe that to be colorblind and to not recognize and have particular sentiments towards your own group is unnatural, and it's not good for society. I think just as I love my wife and my children more than I love my neighbor's wife and children, and that's not a bad thing. It extends to your group, and that's a natural instinct. And so I think, and pretty much of the world embraces that view, except the white race, and as a result, this concept, this public policy position that none of this matters, is resulting in the destruction of Western civilization, and it's a genocide on white people, and that in itself is against the United Nations Charter. So I believe
yeah, I mean, I understand, but first of all, I mean, again, it's a private matter. I have no problem with people associating with their particular ethnic background, their race. I mean, I'd be hypocritical if I said otherwise. But as a matter of public policy, we don't do that in this country. We don't have a particular, at least we haven't up until recently, and this is why this is the problem I have with multiculturalism, that they're putting, race as an issue that defines a person. Now, we are defined by those things, but as a matter, to varying degrees. Some people are, some people aren't. But it's not really any of the business of the government to get into those sorts of questions. And, you talk about a genocide against white people. I don't think that's going on inside the United States. You could make that case perhaps in other countries. But, in this country, white people, black people, all people of various races are free to associate with each other. I don't think that there's any attempt to try to tell any particular race or ethnic group what they can and cannot do in terms of association. And I don't think that white people, as the term is defined, and we should talk about that, are under any particular pressures in this country.
See, the position that you've taken is the traditional stance of a libertarian. And the natural conclusion of that stance is open borders and the ultimate elimination of all distinct groups. And so that's...
I don't think so. I disagree with that. I reject that.
We hold a lot of libertarian positions, but we believe that maintaining the integrity of one's ethnicity is so important that libertarian concerns have to give way towards...
No, I'm sorry to disagree with you here, but I reject that. I don't think that a libertarian view is therefore saying that people should not associate with their own ethnic background at all. It's just simply saying that as a matter of public policy, we don't need to have the government formally recognize any particular ethnic group, whether it be white or black or otherwise, and that we basically have a society where people are allowed to have equal citizenship and get ahead on merit. There's nothing in the libertarian ethos that says that citizens can't associate with ethnic or orientation if they choose to. I don't see that. And as far as open borders go, no, I don't think that libertarians support, I mean, if they do, they're wrong, but they don't have to support open borders in that we want to have immigration into this country based upon the ability of the nation to sustain it economically.
Yes,
which is an issue because we can't.
See, what you're combining is the worst of libertarianism with the worst of capitalism. We need to have immigration of smart people from India so that we can run our government. And this is the same reason why they had slaves in the country. We need to have slaves over here so we can pick our cotton. And it's that capitalist mentality coupled with the freedoms associated with libertarianism that has resulted in the demise of Western civilization worldwide. And so that's why you need to embrace the logical positions of libertarianism and the proper positions of capitalism, but you're embracing the wrong ones in both, and that is going to result in really a nihilistic approach to the worldview. You're doing away with the most basic social construct, the family, the race, the future of society, and you cannot have...
Thank you very much. William Johnson's my guest, the American Freedom Party. William, we're talking here about immigration, and I think that my position is that if a person can contribute to our society, and if they're going to be loyal Americans and take an oath to preserve, protect, and defend our Constitution, and they're going to be self-sufficient and they can contribute something, then they should be seriously considered as a new American if they want to come here and enrich this country. You seem to be implying, or maybe more than implying, that their particular race is a factor that should be considered. So that gets me to a more fundamental question here, which is, given the fact that you think that the white race should be predominant, why is that? I mean, first of all, what is it? How do you define being white? And secondly, why is that important? I mean, why should we look to that as being something that means something other than what it might mean personally to a person? And I get that. But as a matter of public policy, as a matter of our nation, why is that something that should be important when we consider people who are citizens?
Well, I think we need to make it extend it beyond just the area of immigration. It's into our whole, like you say, public policy or system of laws and rules. I mean, when you have a society that says what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine, that's always going to lose out to a society that says, to an incoming group that says what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine. And that's essentially what we have here. We have people coming in and taking advantage of the situation that is resulting in a decline in everyone's standard of living. I mean, you have basically responsible.
I agree. Look, listen, I agree with you, but you're not really getting to my question. Look, if you're talking about people coming in and going on welfare, I totally agree with that. That's not, if someone can't contribute to our system by being a self-sufficient person who is making it the same way my ancestors made it, after all, we are a nation of immigrants, then yes, I mean, that is a serious question. But my question to you, getting more to the issue here, is why is it that you think that being white has significance, and what is it about that means something to you?
Okay. Well, okay, to continue on with my thought, when we have responsible countries, and it is not just the whites that are responsible. You have the West is saying, okay, overpopulation is destroying the entire environment, destroying the animal life, the wildlife. So the Western world has cut back on its population growth. Japan has cut back on its population growth. China has cut back on its population growth. Yet the rest of the world are breeding so rapidly that the responsible societies to keep in check and keep the balance on this earth are being overrun by the people who are not responsible. And that's the issue that we need to address. I think that race is important for a variety of reasons, because you may think it's not important, but then if you go into to Detroit and you happen to hit a child there and get out to help him out, and you're beaten nearly to death because of your race, you've pretty come to seeing that race may not be important to you, but it's important to everybody kicking and clubbing you. That's the society that we.
Well, let me respond to both of your points, William.
Okay.
First of all, I don't know exactly what you're suggesting about problems of overpopulation. It sounds to me like you might be into this whole, idea that the Planned Parenthood's into, which is to have forced abortions in China and other measures like that. And that is something that the U.S. government's been involved in. It's kind of almost a neo-eugenic program to reduce certain races. There have been forced sterilizations of women in Africa and in India. This was actually a part of the policy of the government of Indira Gandhi. But that's a separate subject. I totally disagree with that. But, if that's your stand, then you're joining a lot of people on the left on that one. But domestically speaking, I'm not suggesting that people don't value their racial or ethnic background, as it were, and that there is not racial and ethnic conflicts in this country. There certainly is. But I want to get to a more fundamental question, which is, what is it about race? What is it? I mean, why do you think, as you said, you started the program by saying that you wanted to have a white separatist entity inside the United States. So I'm asking you, what is it about being white? How do you define that? And why is that important? And what would a so-called white entity look like?
Okay. The term that I use is a white ethno-state. And that's a term that's gaining, popularity now.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you to define that when we come back from a break here. We'll be right back. William Johnson's my guest, the American Freedom Party. This is an ongoing series of mine where I bring in people who are involved with political movements and parties and ideas that are generally not getting much coverage in the mainstream media. I assume that our listeners can hear what's being said and make up their own minds regarding how they think about it. I'm having people, as I said, on both the left and the right. I've got the Communist Party coming up next week. I want to find out what are the basic belief systems and what makes people tick in terms of what they believe. William, you're talking about an ethno-national state within the United States. Now, when we started the program, I asked you if your organization supported the Constitution of the United States. It seems to me that you're calling for, a secession from the Union, or how do you define such a state, and where would it be physically, and what would it be like? I mean, would it be only white people, and how would that work?
Well, I mean, it's not in violation of any of the constitutional principles. I mean, you have Texas now. You've got a lot of people saying Texas needs to secede from the state, and that's not anti-constitution. There's procedures for them to do that, and so you can be very much pro-America, pro-Constitution, and supportive of the government, but want to have change so that you can achieve something to counter the destructive.
First of all, I disagree. I disagree with that. I agree with Abraham Lincoln's argument, which was that the federal government preceded the existence and the ratification of the states, and that the federal government, our government, with all of its faults, is indivisible. I don't think that I do not support secessionist movements. Now, you are talking about a secession from the Union, I guess, or am I wrong?
Not necessarily. That has to be worked out. But someone who lives on an Indian reservation can be very much pro-American and have his own government and his own regulations, and you can't say that he's anti-American because they have.
Well, yeah, but Indian reservations are not sovereign. I understand that, but they're not. Even though they might want to pretend otherwise, they are not sovereign. They exist within states, and that they have to answer to states. They have a certain couple of limited issues of sovereignty. And by the way, I have some problems with that.
Sure,
but they're not.
The point I'm making.
They're not separate from the.
Right.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is that there are many precedents out there where you can achieve this and still be very much for the Constitution, and that's
okay. All right. Let's grant your argument that this can be done according to the Constitution for the sake of argument, even though I'm not endorsing that.
Okay.
Therefore, my question to you is, why would you want to do this? Are you suggesting white reservations? I mean, what is this going to look like, and why do it?
First of all, why do it is because we have a system that is not working. We have trying to patchwork correct some of the past problems based on race has resulted in a lot of anger in many different groups and a lot of unfair treatment of all different peoples. And you have different. So
then are you suggesting a separate entities for white people and some maybe separate for black people and other groups? I mean, I want you to talk about what you're talking about here. Okay. I mean, are you advocating certain states become like all white and secede from the Union? I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, but I'd like you to get down to exactly what it is you're talking about.
Okay. The first thing is that I believe, and a lot of us believe, that multiculturalism and diversity is a failure, and it's going to result in the destruction of white civilization and Western civilization. That's the first premise that I believe in.
All right. Well, we're going to take another break here. I don't think you can necessarily tie being white into Western civilization, even if most of the people happen to be white. I mean, it's not.
Hello,
the relevant thing isn't their race.
And together with my good friend.
Thank you very much. William Johnson's here from the American Freedom Party. Look, William, we've already talked about multiculturalism and diversity as problematic, and I agree that it is, although I think your organization seems to be very much part of that in your white identity, which is a multicultural approach to things, that group identity is more important than individual. But I think you're dribbling the ball here. We're reaching toward the end of the program, and I've asked you two basic questions that you don't seem to want to answer. Maybe you'll choose not to, which is fine. But those questions are, what is this ethnic state going to look like in the United States, literally, number one? And number two, why is being white, however that term is defined, why is that important? And how do you define being white? So let's go to the first question. What does the ethnic state look like, literally?
Okay. It needs to be done in compliance with the laws, and it needs to be done through the ballot and peaceful process. First and foremost, that's what's necessary. So you have to convert the minds of the people to say, oh, yes, this is a good thing. And then it can be done. And
what would that thing be? I mean, what would be on the ballot? We want to have a white state?
Well, you don't put it that simply. There are movements now for people to conquer.
Well, how do you put it complexly? I mean, look, this is. I like to reduce things down to what they really are. I don't like to have things couched in complexities. I want to get to what's really being said. Now, what is it that you're advocating here? You're a very sophistic fellow. I know you're a Harvard graduate. You sound, you're able to talk very well around an issue. But it's my job as an on-air journalist to get to the essence, to distill what's talked about here. Now, look, I'm not trying to even necessarily make a judgment. I just want to get to what you're about. Now, when you say you want to have an ethnocentric state, what is that going to look like? I want to know. I'd like you to tell me in plain language.
Okay. The first question you need to address, there have been a lot of movements over the years to be able to create this. You had the Back to Africa movement by Marcus Garvey, who wanted all the blacks to go back, and that's how Liberia was established. So there was initially in a movement that...
Liberia was actually established in the 19th century. Marcus Garvey was in 1920s, and that was a manumission movement. But we've got to take another break here. Hopefully...
Hello, Mike. Chuck Morse speaks.
American Freedom Party. William, again, you started out the program by talking about an ethno-state inside the United States. Now you're bringing up all sorts of other things to the black separatist movement and all that, which is fine, but you're dancing around the issue. I want to know what you at the American Freedom Party and you as a person have in mind for an ethno-white state in America. Okay. What is it going to look like? Where is it going to be?
This cannot be created in a vacuum. This is not a philosophical issue. This is a practical concept that has to be worked out fairly with all people involved. So it's not up to me.
And what's it going to look like when it's worked out?
The only thing I can recite to are the precedents that have existed and use that to draw from to create something in the future. You ask, what's it going to look like? Well, in America in the past, right, there have been court cases and laws and based upon three issues for distinguishing who is white and who is not. You have the ascertainable trace test, you have the percentage test, and you have the appearance test. So you ask, what are the white people going to look like? You have to look at the precedents that have been taken in the past and come up with...
Well, how are those things in American law? Well, wait a minute. First of all, now we're getting into your defining exactly who is white and what that means, which is something that's all right. But that's something that there's been a great deal of difference of opinion on. For example, if you look at John Adams's diary during colonial times, and I've studied Adams. I'm actually from Quincy, and I've read a lot of his papers. I consider myself to be somewhat of an armchair scholar on Adams. He wrote about people, who were not Anglo-Saxons, English, as being of a different race. He wasn't criticizing them, but he viewed them, and he viewed Catholics as being different. And his attitude at the time was, all of these people make up for a good future American republic in this continent. But his definition of race, I think, was typical of people in colonial times, which was that the Irish were not white, that the Swedes were not white. The only people that were white were Anglo-Saxons. So you're talking about, first of all, you say...
That underscores the problem that we face. And the solution, first of all, we have to convert society to realize that there's a problem and that the way we're going now does not work. Then those...
Why is there a problem? Well, first of all, you said that there are American... Wait a minute. You said that there are American laws and in the Constitution that recognize a test for who is white? What such laws?
Okay.
Could you show me that?
Okay, it's not in the Constitution, but there have been through...
Where is it in any American law? Where is there an American law that shows any situation where someone is going to be tested for their race? I mean, this is a Germanic thing during the 1930s, where they would test people to find out what their level...
cases analyzing who...
Such as?
Right.
Such as?
I just mentioned there have been court cases deciding based upon those three concepts: percentage.
Give me an example of a court case that decided that. Give me an example of a court case.
You know, if you want to hire me,
well, you've made look.
Brief it. I don't have.
Well, you're the one who brought this up. You're a lawyer. You brought up the fact that there are court cases where there was a decision made based upon some kind of an analysis of someone's race, as if this therefore would make it precedent law. I'm asking you simply to back up your assertion with an example.
Okay, throughout the course of American history, there have been many cases that had to turn on what the person's race is, whether they could become admitted here, whether they should be excluded under the Chinese Exclusion Act, whether they would be considered citizens under the Constitution of or excluded. There have been many precedents on that. I don't know that off the top of my head, but courts have deliberated.
Yeah, for immigration. Okay.
Oh, not just for immigration.
Look, I agree
for citizenship, for voting, for being able to attend schools. This was a common issue that was discussed in the courts prior to Brown versus the Board of Education. So I don't know what these cases are.
I think prior to the Civil War, maybe.
Well, Brown.
But and yeah, all right. So then what you're talking about then is Jim Crow laws, for example, in certain southern states, which said that black people could not use public accommodations. Is that what you're talking about?
That does not work. If you're talking about what court cases analyze it, sure, there were some Jim Crow law cases that analyzed it. The point that I'm making...
Yeah, but they were thrown out by the Civil Rights Act of 1965.
I know.
I mean, do you think...
That's why we have what we have.
And you're... all right, so then you want to bring back Jim Crow?
No.
I mean, is this something...
That is another failure. That's why that was another. That's like affirmative.
All right. So then your suggestion then, and we're reaching toward the end of the program here, William. Your suggestion is to create a separatist white state. Is that right?
A white ethno-state. Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, we'll be right back. Okay. William Johnson's here, the American Freedom Party. So, William, you're talking about a white separate state. That where would this be? Is it a particular state in our union that you'd want to use as your territory? I mean, how would that happen?
Oh, I don't know. We're nowhere near even addressing that issue yet. We just have to wake the people up to say that the current system does not work.
Do you want to make non-white people in this state be forced to leave the state? Are they not going to have citizenship?
What do you mean, which state?
This white ethnic state you're talking about.
If you have a white ethno-state, it is a state where it's a state where only white people live in it. Yes.
Okay, fine. So in other words, this is going to be a white state defined white as you would define it. I don't know how many generations back you want to go. All right. So how it will be defined by the state, which I assume will mean that you'd have to prove your whiteness based upon going back a couple of generations. And once you approve that whiteness, then you can live in that state. And if you don't prove it, then you don't get to live in that state. Is that it?
Those are issues that all need to be discussed.
Well, that's what we're doing. We're discussing it, and I want to know why this is. Why is this something that's a virtue? Is there a particular virtue once you define what it is to be white? Is there a particular virtue to that? Number one, and number two, is there a virtue to having a state based upon that? I mean, is there any other state in the world that is based upon such criterion?
Because
has there been?
Yeah, Japan. You got to be Japanese to live in Japan. If you're Korean, you're out of luck. But in any event,
that's not true. Yeah, that's not true at all. There are non-Japanese people who live in Japan, and they're equal citizens. Actually,
well, that's true for the last 15 years, and it's very small. Before that, the laws changed about 15 years ago. But in any event,
yeah, I think they did change after we dropped a bomb in Hiroshima. Anyway, go on.
Okay. The point is that we live in a society where white people are afraid to even be proud of who they are. They don't talk about their heritage or their race or anything, even at the dining room table. And the books. Oh, come on.
Listen, we don't have time right now because we're running out of time, but I want to do another show with you on that and exactly discuss what that means. All right. My guest is William Johnson, the American Freedom Party. William, thanks for joining me this afternoon.